You call yourself an edumagineer. I hope I've said that correctly.
I do, and you have, yes.
Maybe explain that to the people taking this webinar and give some history or background to who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I couldn't find a title that felt adequately described who I am and what I do, so I made one up. So yes, I call myself an edumagineer. If you think about it and kind of dissect that word a little bit, there is some education, there's some imagination, there's some engineering, maybe a little bit of magic in there, somebody said, and another person mentioned gin. I cannot confirm or deny that. But I call myself an edumagineer because I believe that education can and should be better, not just for the sake of our children, but also for our teachers and, of course, for our community and society as a whole. And I'm not just a dreamer and an imaginer, so I am a relentless optimist. And I have a lot of faith in our teachers and a lot of faith in our capacity for change as humans. But I'm not just an imaginer and a dreamer. I'm also very much a practical, hands-on person. Personally, 50% left brain and right brain. So the engineering part is about helping teachers and school leadership teams and even students in building and redesigning and reconceptualizing education. So I was a teacher myself, high school teacher for many years. And my journey's taken me on some interesting ups and downs and roller coasters and all those wonderful things. But essentially now I have my own company called Teach, Learn, Innovate, and we work with teachers and school leadership teams all around the world to edumagineer and hopefully try and make education more relevant and more meaningful and better meet the needs of both of our teachers and our students as we continually try and adapt to this crazily changing landscape.
Below this video, you'll see a whole lot of resources that link to the work that Lindsay does. And if you'd like to engage with her wherever you are in the world, just reach out, and I'm sure she'd love to connect you to the tools and the thinking and the things that make education great and extend what you're currently doing in the classroom. So, Lindsay, we're really focusing in this webinar on how boys learn, but how that translates into the online and the distance learning space. Now, many schools will probably be returning in some form by the time people are watching this webinar, but there are also schools who are not returning until September or even October around the world. So we'd really like to give some insights into what tools and other things schools can be doing when they think about boys learning. And so we're going to start with competition and collaboration and ask you to share some of the tools that you've encountered work really well to foster that sense of competition and collaboration in the online and distance learning classroom.
Sure. I think I just get so excited when I think about those two seemingly oxymoronic terms next to each other, because I think one of the things that online learning or even a blended learning approach does is it gives us visibility. So where you have, boys in classrooms by themselves, it's very difficult to see what everybody is doing and where everybody is at. And I think if you just look at, your Microsoft platforms and your Google platforms that so easily allow for collaboration for our students to all be working on the same document or same deck of slides or same PowerPoint presentation, just that measure of visibility and that kind of constructive collaboration in a digital space really does get me excited. I think one of the things that I'm a massive advocate for is student creation, and that students are involved in engaging collaboratively with content, with concepts. And so one of the things that I love is a strategy which I call divide and conquer research. There are different names for it. But really where students are collaboratively, for example, working on a deck of slides, and they are investigating different elements of a particular topic. So maybe we're creating character profiles of a book that we're reading, or maybe it's the content that we needed to cover divided into little sections, and you've got students working together. I think that measure of visibility in collaboration, that we can co-construct knowledge in a visible public digital space is really an exciting way to construct learning. And I think even things like collaborative storytelling and collaboratively checking in and doing little fun activities where there's visibility it automatically kind of levels up, right? When I can see somebody else's work, then I'm competing a little bit. There's a little bit more of an authentic audience for my work. So yeah, that's definitely one of the ways that I've seen collaboration and competition being effectively leveraged by teachers in this kind of remote or blended learning environment. And then, of course, when it comes to competition, you've got incredible online assessment tools that are gamified in nature. So things like Quizlet and Quizzes, which allow teachers to create kind of study sets or sets of questions, different kinds of learning engagements. And those platforms have themselves built-in aspects of that kind of competition, those gamified learning elements, like your leaderboard. We've got an avatar, so I can maybe not be quite myself. I can be a different kind of hero. And maybe where I would have seen myself as not great at maths, now I'm this maths hero and I can play this game differently. And kind of that visibility, that community, and all of those tools have, even since the school closures with COVID were announced, have added additional functionality. So previously they had these great live games, which you could play in a classroom environment, and they were kind of set up for one physical space. But now they all have live games that can work totally independent of location. So all of the boys can be online playing a game, engaging in their learning content at the same time. So some really fun and exciting stuff. And I think it's important that we remember, the element of competition is not so that our children are not adopting a growth mindset, that they're labeling themselves, that they are, that there's this kind of anxiety which some competition can bring, but where it's brought about in a thoughtful space. And even when our students can create those own little study sets. So I've seen kids going, hey, I've made this Quizlet study set, like I will give this prize to the person who can top the leaderboard or beat my score. And so, yeah, just a lot of fun. And again, that community, I think a lot of us are feeling very isolated in our homes. Our kiddies are feeling isolated. So when we use those tools that have competition and collaboration built in together, we really are able to design some awesome learning experiences.
It's funny that you mentioned, that collaboration and competition are seemingly sort of opposed to one another, and yet the research reports on which we're basing some of the content in this webinar actually pools those two in the same space, simply because, just as you framed it, that competition doesn't always have to be about having one winner per se, but it's about everyone learning better and getting better together. And so it's wonderful to hear you say that. I want to move on to the next point, which I think relates very closely to what you've been sharing, and that's around the sense that there needs to be immediacy for boys to learn really, really well. And a lot of that has to do with keeping boys engaged in learning. And I think many schools are struggling to understand how that happens in the remote and the online space. What would your suggestions be around how that happens, and some tools that can help schools engage their boys?
I'm just thinking now. So when we work with teachers at Teach, Learn, Innovate, we don't call them teachers. We generally, when we work with teachers, we offer them the title of a learning architect as an alternative label that they can adopt and they can internalize. And I think, I love tech tools, but the tech tools are only tools unless they are thoughtfully used in the hands of a learning architect. So when we're talking about immediacy, even if a tool has built-in immediacy, it's where in that learning process the immediacy is most pertinent and most relevant, and where in that learning process do I use these tools? That's really the artistry of great learning design, right? So I don't want it to come across that I'm just saying, oh, there's this tool and there's this tool and there's this tool, and just throw them haphazardly at, whatever, and all of a sudden we're going to be cooking up magical learning experiences, right? Yeah. But I do think, the two that I mentioned earlier, Quizlets and Quizzes, have got built in, as soon as I answer a question, I know, is this right or is this wrong? And then some of them have these little fun memes and little gamified elements as well. But I think other tools like even your simple kind of Google or Microsoft Forms for crafting learning journeys are really, really powerful for two reasons particularly. So the one for me is that these tools have the ability to give feedback based on an answer. So as a kiddie, I'm sitting by myself, I'm answering these questions, where typically if I had to hand in a test, I'm only going to get feedback once the test is marked or once the project has been assessed or whatever. If we're designing online, we have the opportunity to give feedback right then and there. And that feedback is not just, you got it wrong, here's some resources to help you, here's a video that you can watch. But similarly, it's immediate feedback on how can I extend my learning. So that extension and enrichment can be built in there as well, right? Which I think is really, really powerful in terms of learning design. And within those same tools, so within your Google Forms and your Microsoft Forms, they both have the ability to differentiate based on an answer. So you can take learners to a different section of a form based on what they answer. And in that way, you can actually build almost like I call them a choose your own learning adventure type of form, where based on an answer, almost like those books in the old days, if you think this happens, go to page that. If you think this happens, go to page that. Based on an answer, I can now be taken to resources, videos, supplementary questions that either support and give remediation and help me understand a concept better, or that extend or enrich that. So I think definitely using those online forms and self-marking quizzes is a great strategy for enhancing immediacy in the feedback. On a very simple level, using voice notes. So there are some Chrome extensions like Talk and Comment and Mote. I know we all know voice notes on our phone, but often we're assessing work in Teams or Classroom or whatever online. So I also love that for a feedback workflow. Not only is it a bit quicker from a teacher's perspective than having to kind of type a whole comprehensive comment, but there's that human element as well. And I can pop a little voice note in their work and give them that feedback on a much more immediate basis than it would take me to issue a full-on written comment. And then, of course, there's tools like Edpuzzle. So Edpuzzle adds immediacy and interactivity to video. So it'll allow you to take a video and then you can insert into that video voice notes of the teacher explaining something. You can re-record your own little piece of the audio. So maybe the terms being used are foreign, or you'd like to translate that into another language. The video can be paused using the tool. So it automatically pauses at a particular point, and you can ask a question to check, was their understanding as they watch that piece of the video, with immediate self-marking feedback and a comment. So you've really got the ability to put in there open-ended questions, self-marking, short little multiple choice questions embedded within a video. And then I think what's really important also is that the teacher gets that data of the student engagement. So where watching a video can often be quite a passive experience, we can really increase that immediacy. The video pauses, they can't move forward, they can't fast forward. So it really, I've seen teachers watching Edpuzzles, and when it pauses, they immediately lean forward. So there's that much more kind of immediate engagement. Yeah. And I know a lot of teachers have now kind of discovered screencasting and are using kind of screencasts to present their lessons. But no one would teach a lesson for half an hour without pausing to ask a question or kind of, checking back, let's remember from last lesson. So I've even seen teachers taking Screencastify or Loom recordings of their lessons and then putting them in Edpuzzle to give that much more immediate kind of interaction. So just incredible stuff that can be done.
And I think what you say is so true. Just, you framed it earlier by saying this all has to do with teachers doing what they do best. The tools are there, but it's about imagining the best way to design learning so that boys remain engaged. Cool. I want to move on now. Teachers of boys know that problem solving in particular and product creation are great ways to engage boys in learning. And probably some of them are thinking, well, how do I craft that, product creation journey or problem solving journey for kids when they're at home? What would your suggestions be, Lindsay?
Sure. So I think for me, one of the key strategies, which I've been fortunate to engage with, kind of almost as a student myself, um, is the design thinking process. So I think often, if I think back to almost any project that I was given at school, we created things. We created a circuit board. Everyone created one of those. I remember creating a vegetable garden and posters and all of these kinds of things. But I think the thing that I'm starting to realize around designing tasks or learning journeys where our boys are creating products is that if we just say, okay, we need you to create this, ready, steady, go, there's a lot of deep learning that we miss out in the process. So I am a massive advocate for applying the design thinking process on a student level whenever we are inviting our students to create anything. So I recently worked with some teachers and we conceptualized a little driving question. So what could you create to help your home or a home in this time of crisis? And then of course we need to take them through the design thinking process. So we start with empathizing, right? What is the problem we want to solve? Writing a point of view statement for who that, for the person who is affected by that particular problem. Then we move on to strategies for ideating and brainstorming. And I could talk all day about a number of different strategies that we can pin in there, right? But we want to look at the design thinking process. How do we empathize? How do we truly understand the user? Who am I creating for? Even just in that process, if I now have to conduct an interview with that user, we've got our language skills happening there. We've got our deep thinking, we've got constructing, we've got to come up with questions, we've got to ask them, we've maybe got to transcribe it, maybe we're going to create a little video of that. So the ideating, brainstorming, getting feedback, looking at it, doing the calculations, starting to prototype products, then we immediately need to do some costings and some maths and all of that. Testing that with a user, getting feedback again, we're understanding, qualitative data collection, mapping out, graphing data, that can all happen within a design thinking process. And I mean, now we're starting to tap into all sorts of traditional subjects. I'm a massive advocate for cross-curricular learning. That should not be a secret. But I think that when we start to use those kind of frameworks, and there's some brilliant resources out there. We'll pop the links in the bottom there as well, around using design thinking as a framework for engaging boys in task design, and just looking at it being intentional about each stage of the process. So even when it is, what is your pitch? How are you selling your product, or how are you trying to get funding for your product? Making those experiences real world learning. So I think as a pedagogy, when we want to think about problem solving or product creation, when we're intentional about crafting each stage of that learning process, then the learning is much deeper and much richer. When we just say, okay, create this and go, and there's no iteration on the process, there's no feedback, there's none of all of those things, and it become product focused, then I think we lose a lot of the learning. I think as far as, creation goes, also very important for us to understand that although now teachers are creating videos and various types of digital material, possibly more than ever before, that actually there's some incredibly deep learning that can happen when our students are the ones creating digital products. So whether it is a little tutorial video on how to solve this problem, or how to create this, or how this process works, there are so many online tools like WeVideo and Animoto and all of these lovely tools that allow students to create little stop motion animation. So we're learning about photosynthesis. Okay, let's bring that process to life. Let's make that thinking visible. And I've seen some beautiful choice boards where teachers are just saying, okay, I want you to show me what you've learned about X, whatever we're learning about, but you can create me a rap, you can create a song, you can create a video, you can create an interactive diagram, you can create a little lesson for a friend to teach them what you learn about this. And when we start to give our students diversity of expression and choice in what they're creating, not only does it mean that we are not marking 40, 50, 60 of the same thing. My friend Chris Lehman says, if you give an assignment and you get back 40 of the same thing, that's not a project, that's a recipe. So I think even for the joy of teachers, where our students have, if they have tech in their hands, to not just make that tech the tool that they're using to consume and to explore, but really that they're adding that layer of using tech as a tool to create products that show their understanding and their thinking.
I want to just get on to sort of the last thing that I believe is really important for boys in learning, and that is boys really learn well when there's a relational connection with each other and with their teachers. And so I think in this time where we're all apart or have been apart or might have a sort of blended type of learning where kids are in school some days but not in the others, what are some ways we can really keep connecting with our students? Probably also just checking in to see if they're, if they're well and if they're coping. Because, with that disconnect, there's often there are mental health issues that go along with that as well. What would your suggestions be around the relational connection or keeping that strong with boys during distance learning?
I think, from a very simple level, I think sometimes we forget, boys will come into your class and you'll have a chat or you'll say something, or even as you start your lesson, you might share a little anecdote from the weekend or make a comment about a sports team, or, do a little bit of a check back in. Remember last lesson we did this, I think what's so important even when you're just creating like a little teaching video, for instance, or when we're posting something on Teams or Classroom, I think it's important for us to remember that we can actually come across as quite robotic and unhuman as teachers when we don't do those things that we would normally do in person. Now it's just like, here's your work, do this, there's the attachment, see this is the deadline, watch the video, and. So I think on a very simple level, it's really important for us to be conscious of the language that we use when we're engaging, even if it's just in text and in sending things. Or if you're creating a video, don't feel like you have to be this YouTube, movie star, kind of super teacher that's broadcasting to the whole world. Be you, make those jokes, make those comments, give the banter about the sports teams or whatever it is that you connect with your students on normally. I think that's a really important thing to remember. And then also using, again, things like those Google and Microsoft Forms. I've been working with teachers recently who have just created the most amazing check-in forms. Just saying, how are you? Putting in little emojis, which emojis feel like you this week? What are the things that you're really struggling with? What are you loving about online learning? What am I doing as a teacher that's really working for you? What's not working? Using those tools to kind of open up those conversations it's just so incredibly important. And I think even, maybe we make a little collaborative slideshow and I say to you, if you were an animal this week, which one would you have been? Pop a picture of the animal, tell me the descriptions, We'll link some examples of those kind of collaborative activities at the bottom for you as well, because I just think that there's so much, we feel so much pressure, I think, a lot of the time to cover the content, but it has to be connection over content. It has to be connection first, and then the content needs to follow. Because if we just think I need to get through this content and we're not thinking about how am I connecting, where are they at? I'm seeing this one, there's a, very sad panda, and there's a bunch of words that worry me, like, let me give them a call, let me check in. If we don't see that, and I think that's the danger when we're teaching behind screens, often it's our cameras are off, or we can put on a brave face and you can't see that body language from your class. Really, really vital to be doing that. And then I think in closing, one of my favorite tools on the kind of connections in online learning, of course we've got Zoom and Meet and Teams and Skype and all of those things for video calls, but of course the timing of synchronous video calls and the bandwidth and all of those things remains a bit of a challenge. But I really love using Flipgrid for student responses. So for those of you who don't know, Flipgrid is a tool where you almost collect a little board of video responses. So you as the teacher can give your students a prompt, and then they can all upload their own little video responding to your prompt. So I've seen beautiful examples of saying, okay, draw me a picture of your holiday and explain it to me, or tell me what you thought about the story that we read, or what questions do you have, or using your little check-in questions again, what cartoon character do you feel like and why, or all of these things, and it's a really incredibly simple tool to use, even where we've got like much younger boys and parents need to kind of just quickly hold up the cell phone. There's a Flipgrid app. They put in the phone the code, and it opens up the phone, and they can share their message. And I think when I've been introducing teachers to this tool in this time, just the delight for the teacher even of seeing their boys' faces is just so incredible. And the amazing thing is that the boys can actually reply to each other's videos with their own video. So you could build that into the activity, or you could add it as a second layer. All right, now everybody shared about their book that they've read. Go and listen to somebody else's video and respond and tell them what you thought. So it makes that asynchronous communication possible, but with a very powerful video medium, which obviously is kind of many times as close as we can get to that face-to-face contact. So again, one tool that can be used in a multiplicity of ways to really foster those relational connections and keep those going.
Lindsay, this has been fascinating, and I really, really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are and how in demand you are, and you've just given us such significant ideas, and I think your thinking will even spur other thinking as people have listened. So I want to say thank you so much for this, and thank you for the resources you've shared as well. And we'll just reminding people to check out Teach, Learn, Innovate, and Lindsay will be happy to engage with you, and she's got some amazing programs that you can participate in. So check her out and support her as well. Thank you for doing this.